Today we will be hearing of some really, in my perspective, highly influential voices from the African context operating in the impact production space. And obviously, I think, like, definitely from my own experience, when I started making films, my hope was always to make films that has some sort of effect on the world. Yeah, and but I didn't know really that I was actually already applying impact production strategies when I started out as a young filmmaker. And I really only started living myself into this space when I stumbled across the term in around 2016. When Doc Society coined the term. So I think there's a lot of filmmakers, especially also from our students who are interested in social and conservation and environmental filmmaking, that apply these strategies, but they don't really know that they are. And over the last year, I've also been speaking a lot at conservation events, wildlife events, and with broadcasters about how to bring impact production strategies into kind of the mainstream broadcast space. And it was quite staggering for me to actually realize that, well, people do not know what impact production is within those spaces. Whenever I kind of put up my hand and say, can people please let me know what impact production is, usually what comes back is, listen, it is clicks, viewership, reach of the audience. If we manage that, we've achieved impact. And that's, of course, what we will be talking about today, not entirely the correct perspective. So I hope by the end of this 90-minute session that you will walk out of it with a sense that you know a bit more about impact production, you know what type of training is available and what type of resources you can consult. But you also know the extensive and, dare I say, also kind of pioneering work that our guest speakers are doing in Africa today. But before we go into the nitty-gritty, I'd also like to just take a few minutes to introduce the speakers properly, because no, you've seen the images of them, but you actually don't perhaps know exactly what all of them do precisely. So first, I would like to wholeheartedly welcome Miriam. And Miriam is an impact strategist and cultural producer based in Nairobi, Kenya. And she's had over a decade's worth of experience working at this intersection of art and activism, designing and implementing programs and outreach initiatives, operating within a broad spectrum of artistic mediums and social impact areas. And she's currently also the coordinator of GIPA. And we'll hear about them quite a lot today because they're one of the significant organizations within this space. And she's also previously worked on as an impact producer on various films such as Softie, which I absolutely adore. If you haven't seen it, really do look it up, which was produced in Kenya. Los Hermanos, which is a Cuba, USA co-production. No Simple Way Home from South Sudan. And currently in we've screened this film yesterday to a number of students. They're made in Ethiopia. And at the heart of her work is the commitment to centering and amplifying underrepresented stories and voices. So that's Miriam. I can go on, but I'll leave it there. And then we have Nyambok, who is a communication strategist and impact producer working at the intersection of media, arts, and social change. He also serves as the communications and outreach manager of Documentary Africa, or DOCA, and we'll hear more about this organization later on, where he also co-designed the Real Impact program. So then, like in his outside of the film kind of side of things, he also co-founded Mad Royal Entertainment, which is an experimental music and culture company. He's also the impact producer for a 2023 film, Our Land, Our Freedom, which I'm very eager to see. And then last but not least, we've also got Liane. She's a senior lecturer at the Center for Film and Media Studies at the University of Cape Town. She convenes the MA Documentary Arts program there, and she also is involved in the Impact Facilitator online short course that we'll also be hearing about a little bit later. She's one of the co-directors of another very influential kind of program within this space, the Climate Story Lab ZA, and is also a member of the Global Impact Producer Alliance. And she was one of the producers for Strike a Rock, which opened the Encounters Documentary Film Festival in 2017. And the film also then screened in various other film festivals, influential film festivals like the Sheffield Doc Fest, IDFA, and DIF. And her current research and public engagement activities very much centers around impact production. So as you can see, kind of our speakers have a breadth of experience. So Miriam, Nyambok, and Liane, welcome so much, and thank you very much for taking the time to come and speak to us. Yeah.
Thanks.
So
welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Miriam, can I first and foremost turn to you, because I'm aware that there's a kind of a range of knowledge about impact production in the room, and some might know what it is, others just dipping their toes into the concept, and many might not know. So would you mind kind of setting the tone and getting us all on the same page? Brilliant.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Raina Marie, for the introduction and for inviting me to be part of this panel. I'm so happy to be alongside Liane and Prince, and I'm so happy to just have this conversation, a very needed conversation. So yeah, I have the honor to kind of set the tone and share a bit more around what impact producing is. And I'm going to share my screen, so just give me one moment. I have a short presentation. All right. Does that look good, everyone? Yep.
Yep.
All right. So as Raina Marie mentioned, I am an impact producer. I've been working in the space for the last 6 years and have gotten the chance to work on a bunch of awesome African films. And I'm also the co-coordinator of the Global Impact Producers Alliance, also known as GIPA. And a lot of the work that we do is to expand knowledge and awareness of impact producing and support the work of impact producers. So I want to share our Impact 101. For those who might not have much of a background on impact producing. So what is impact producing? A clear and precise definition would be that it's the work of maximizing a film's potential to drive social change. So this work is connecting the most passionate and engaged audiences to your films, those that are either the most affected by the film's themes or have the most influence by the themes. The work is very strategic, it's very thoughtful, collaborative, and driven by specific goals, outcomes, and call to actions. And at the foundation is recognizing that film and storytelling is more than just entertainment or making money, even though those two things are important as well in a film's life cycle, but just also wanting to uplift the return on investment on the social outcomes in addition to the financial outcomes. So that's what impact producing is. The practice of impact producing has always been there. Using art, storytelling for awareness and bringing nuance to different social issues is nothing new. But I would say that the field of practice kind of crystallized in the early 2010s with various film practitioners around the world really coming together and like refining different tools and resources and tactics with, as Raina Marie mentioned earlier, Doc Society, who's been a major player in this space and expanding the work of impact producing, helping to bring out the Impact Field Guide, which is often considered like the Bible in the impact producing space, really just kind of crystallizing a field of practice, tools, and knowledge to really bolster this idea that film has the power to create major change. And the challenge back then and still now is advocating for impact producing and impact campaigns to be an integral part of a film's life cycle and part of budget lines, because this work is very important and needs to be funded. So it's still young but growing in a really beautiful space. And it's really at the base of it is around the communities, the protagonists, the issues, and the stories coming together to contribute to larger social goals. At the base of impact producing is the power of storytelling. What can a film do? Using the 4 impact dynamics that are in the field guide, we often say that film can either change minds, change behavior, influence policy, or build community, or a combination of all 4. And I'm sure there are many more, but these are the ones that are kind of brought to the surface usually when we're creating impact campaigns or thinking through how a film can create change. You want the story is so important, and you want people to feel something. You want to elicit emotion, and character-driven films are often great towards that, to humanize issues that might be polarizing in an effort at minimum to open conversation and dialogue, at maximum to change policy or change the way people think or how communities engage. But then we must ask, how does this happen? And we can look at the dimensions of impact as a kind of process to start with, mentioning that we start with a compelling story that then builds out to awareness by your film being put out there, being distributed, being in different screenings, the themes being kind of disseminated, and with a proper or with a good impact campaign, there are often call to actions that allow audiences to engage with whatever the film is discussing or bringing out. With this mass movement of engagement, the hope is that there's stronger movements. The film is contributing to a stronger movement within that issue, and in the end, long-term social change. Obviously, this is a very thick process. This is a very big in scale, and a film is only a contributor. It's not the reason of, social change. But we have to acknowledge that film stories play a big role into this space. And especially in the area of awareness and engagement, that's where impact producing can really contribute. I mentioned the term impact campaign. What is an impact campaign? It's a strategic plan that sits at the intersection of the story and social justice, identifying tangible goals, audiences, effective calls to actions, and always centering the communities and participants involved. It's focused in a deliberate pathway to understand what we need to achieve with our documentaries. And this idea of communities and participants and being involved, that's really at the core of it. The story or the film that is being out there is sharing, especially in the nonfiction space, is sharing a true story of someone's life. So the campaign really in addition to focusing on the social change and the issues that we want to address, it's also ensuring the care of participants and ensuring that their stories are bettering their lives. If their stories being put in this format is playing into kind of enriching of their lives as well. This is a really awesome graphic around how a film can move from being a film to producing impact. As I mentioned, the question, what can a film do? You start off, we can break that down into what are the key messages of a film? What is the current context around the issue? Creating theories of change, story environments that eventually contributes to a strategic plan. Who is doing this work? And who's going to do this work? Who's going to do this work? So an impact campaign is a lot of work. And as a filmmaker, the first question is, do I want, once I'm done with all these years of doing this great work of putting this film together, do you now want to take another year, 2, even 3 years to focus on an impact campaign? That's a real question that you need to ask yourself. Then how can I build a team around that? What are the roles of my participants? And how can I find partners and funding? Creating budgets. And then also, how do I pair in distribution with impact? Where do they intersect? Where do they operate in their silos? How can you kind of use it to enrich either side? And then thinking about the key question of evaluation, how do you really know that your film has had the impact that you have intended to? So it's a lot of work, and that's why the impact producer as a kind of profession has also kind of really risen up within the last decade. And as you see there's a lot of things that this producer has to do. I want to speak a little bit to impact in the African context. There's been a surge of documentaries and impact campaigns from Africa, especially in the last decade. I'm just showing a handful here. A lot of these films I either have been part of or have some knowledge around, but there's so many more documentaries that have come out and have had really strong impact campaigns. And it just shows like the richness of the stories that we have within the continent, and also a lot of the work that we want to do in terms of the different social issues that we want to address. Thank You for the Rain was a really great film that focused on climate change. Softie, which is a film I worked on, was a great film around activism, civic engagement. No Simple Way Home spoke to the diaspora. What does it mean to be someone who lives outside of the continent coming back home? I'm currently working on Made in Ethiopia, which speaks around wage equity and labor rights. And there's so many different ways to beautifully tell stories around these very difficult topics. With the different stories that have come out and the ecosystem of impact producing really growing and developing, there have been opportunities and there have been challenges. So I just wanted to bring out some of those. Some of the opportunities that have come are that there are many movements, partners who are working on various social change issues and who see the value of film and story and amplifying these causes. A lot of people might not necessarily think it's important to fund a film to amplify a cause, but I think there's been a lot of evidence showing the power of story and film and media in that space. So there's a lot of potential collaborations and partnerships that can be brought about. There's growing creativity and innovation, both in storytelling and filmmaking, and engagement within the continent. And a lot of young filmmakers, a lot of experienced filmmakers. The ecosystem is just so bubbling. So that allows for a lot of different different and new ways of telling stories and engaging with audiences. And I hope we'll get into that conversation a bit later. There's increased global collaborations around the films and around impact. And there's generally a growing impact community globally and within the the continent. And there will be resources that we'll share towards the end that will really show how much we've grown and how we're continuing to grow. Some of the challenges include audience accessibility. There's no one place to be able to reach your audiences, especially in the continent. You can't just say, I'm going to put my film in the cinema and you'll get a large audience, or I'm going to put my film on Netflix, or I'm going to put my film. It's really, you have to be really creative and thoughtful about where you're reaching your audiences, and realizing that the different formats are growing every day. And how can you utilize these formats to reach those different audiences? There's infrastructure and systems challenges. So there are venues for screening films. There may be cinemas in certain regions and no cinemas in other regions. What are the different ways you can find, you can reach your audiences outside of the traditional cinema theatrical that we might know? Equipment, internet penetration. We watch a lot of our movies now online, even on our phones. Are people able to do that, and do they have the data to do that? So different infrastructure and system challenges. Also, just generally resources to just make the film is always very difficult. And then now you want to find resources for an impact campaign. Like there's always the next step. So that's always a perennial challenge. And then the complexities of participant engagement and care. As I mentioned earlier, you're sharing someone's story, and especially in contexts where films are a very expensive venture. And sometimes a story that you are sharing is someone from a context or community that's in need. How do those power dynamics play out? And what does that look like even in an impact campaign? So these are some of the things that I wanted to bring up and address. And I hope to continue conversations around it as we move on into the panel.
Thank you very much, Miriam. We're definitely going to pick up on several of the issues that you already raised there. I mean, and you specifically point out the kind of the resource difficulties, the funding difficulties, and I think this is very much where Nyambokwe, your organization, comes in and really is supportive of African filmmakers precisely around this topic. Can I invite you to say a few words specifically about your organization and the real impact program that you're running?
Thank you very much, Reina Marie, and thank you, Miriam. Every time you do this presentation, I am often reinvigorated in the field of impact. Thank you so much, Miriam. So first of all, I'll start with a brief introduction in regards to DOCA. So DOCA is an acronym of Documentary Africa, and our main job is basically to support the documentary film ecosystem within the continent. And we do that complementary and directly. We assist filmmakers and producers. We support them via grants and also by sharing opportunities. And we also work with organizations by empowering them to run their existing initiatives, because we're very, very much aware in terms of reinventing the wheel. And as you'll see with my presentation about the real impact program, is that it came from, it actually just came up from a lab. So we had like a setting such as this, and we were just basically offering some training to some of the DOCA beneficiaries prior. This was in late 2022. And we noticed that they kept telling us that we have, they've been interacting with different funders and different organizations, and this word impact is coming up so much. And for them, they were curious to understand that, okay, what is it? And when we actually did the lab with the exemplary Wanja Emily, who I believe is a colleague of Miriam, and also very, very much noted within the Climate Story Lab space with Liana. I think they can speak more about that. And we did the lab, and most of the filmmakers and producers were like, we have been doing this work. We just hadn't given it this name. And that also kind of gave us, that's where we saw a bit of a challenge, in that it's very hard for you to garner support of us, or of something that many people have not sort of already claimed ownership of, right? And what we decided is we came up with the Real Impact program, where we could basically reclaim ownership in terms of what does impact mean within the continent. And this is where I put my slide hat on and share my screen. Just a minute. Right. I'm gonna do that. So what you can so with the real impact, the whole idea is, as I said before with the introduction, to basically reclaim some ownership and center the fact that African voices, especially storytelling, has a strong ability to catalyze social change. And I keep loving that I keep loving that definition that Miriam uses. It's very simple, it's straightforward, that using stories to, instigate social change. It's as simple as that. And the key tenets of the Real Impact program is field building and outreach, training, and granting. And the main reason you'll find this as we if you continue to interact with DOCA, is that we build in the element of financial support in all the programs that we create, because we realize that it's necessary, especially in our side of the world, in Africa, where most of the support usually comes in form of training, in terms of, residencies, workshops, and we appreciate that, right? But that needs to be complementary to financial support, because at the end of it, after you've learned all these things, how do you go ahead and implement it, right? So with field building and outreach, we began in-person gatherings. It was in March and February that we did the gatherings in key focus regions. That's the East and the West. We did one in FESPACO, the largest Pan-African film festival. And we did one in Nairobi, where Miriam and Liani were able to join us. All this was under our Doc Day umbrella, where we were basically being very, trying to fix documentary into any festival or any space that we are in. So we're like that very noisy family member that's always talking about something that they're very passionate about. Like, hey, I know you guys are talking about film. Can you talk about documentary? So that's us with our Doc Day. And this time we managed to sort of give it more of an impact feel. And we had pictures as well. It was quite engaging. And we've also commissioned case studies. And I'm sure Miriam and Liani can say that in as much as we've had a numerous surge of powerful African films, it's quite difficult, especially within the impact field, of identifying and also commissioning impact case studies that analyze how impact campaigns have been run in the continent. Because I know one notable case study that we've used, that was also used in my training, was The Insignificant Man. And we used it in the first lab that we did. And one filmmaker was like, if we did that in Yaoundé, people would be gone. You understand? And in understanding just the contextualization of our African setting, we embarked on ensuring that the program itself can give birth to impact case studies that are done in the continent, that individuals and filmmakers can be able to understand how to maneuver within their particular communities. And for the training, we did an amazing series. Thank you, Liani and Miriam, where we had gatherings in January, where we tackled introduction to impact, developing an impact campaign, as well as now fundraising for impact. Because remember, the engine of most of our initiatives is support, financial and otherwise, right? And that's one thing that we were able to ground in this series. And we had amazing attendance, where we peaked at around 89 individuals across the board. And the training is now evolving into a one-on-one accompaniment for the films and film teams that we've encountered throughout the program. as well as some of the as well as the films that we've also granted, because we don't want to say that, hey, Africa is trained and we're getting so many workshops and residencies. We believe that training and financial support can go complementary. So that's why we've tailor-made the one-on-one mentorship that can give, we're giving you the funds, but ultimately we're also giving you the support for you to better execute those funds. And you saw in Miriam's map the way that there's so many moving parts, and it just helps to have somebody who can look through the whole machine and advise you the better way to proceed, right? Then our main region of focus with our pilot phase, because the RRI was in the program is in its pilot phase, which we're winding up, is we wanted to focus in West Africa, Central Africa, and East Africa. One thing that we noticed is that South Africa and North Africa have had a lot of exposure to the field of impact and were quite advanced. In fact, in our case as DOCA, our first full-on impact grant went to a South African film, which I'll talk about later, called Murder in Paris, a beautiful film that Enver, in fact, we even commissioned a case study from Enver because of how successful that went. And one of the key challenges that we noticed is that remember that a lot of impact work is being done. It's just that a lot of filmmakers and producers are not aware of the wider available tools that they could use to actually support and amplify their work. And we noticed that very starkly in FESPACO, where we had a challenge finding individuals that could talk about the field of impact, right? And one of the ways that we even addressed that and adapted the program as we were working through it, is we invited individuals that were interested in learning about the field, as well as also wanting to be practicing impact producers, to one of the doc days that we had in East Africa, which has a much more vibrant impact culture compared to French-speaking West Africa. And that's a problem that we're trying to sort of address, and in terms of growing the field in the French-speaking world and giving them the tools that can amplify the work that's going there, because they have amazing films and some of them are having amazing, wonderful initiatives. But it's just sometimes you just need somebody to shine the light to where the treasure is, and we hope that the program can actually do that. And speaking about funding and partnership, this program was heavily supported by the Perspective Fund, which is a fund that especially looks at granting and supporting from organizations and also films with impact funding. And one thing that I know that we delved into when we're talking about fundraising for impact in the series that we did, is identifying a funder who understands, or somebody who supports the work, because not all funders are impact funders, but the reality is that when you do find them, it makes your work much easier, right? Because some of them are aware that impact is something that is not very easily measurable, particularly the intangible element of the impact for the community, and having a supporter that understands that is very important. And now when you look at the two other organizations right below, we have DocuBox, the East African Documentary Film Fund, which we collaborated in hosting the Impact Edition Doc Day in East Africa. And they've also had numerous initiatives where they've managed screenings and outreach. And for us, when we came in from the position that it's more about empowering the filmmakers and the community actors within the region with tools to amplify their work, they were very excited about that. And through the collaborations with DocuBox and Kudugu was our West African partner that we worked with in implementing the Doc Day at FESPACO. Through that partnership, we were able to fund 2 films through a pitch prize, and that now comes into full circle in terms of the support. And in DOCA, we have a saying that We always put our money where our mouth is. So we'll train you and we'll give you all the exciting tools, but ultimately there's a high chance that we'll also write you a check, and to make sure that you actually, we can come back to you and say, yeah, what was the issue? Money, we gave you the money. What was the issue? Tools, we gave you the tools. What was the issue? We needed more introductions. We can facilitate that. So it's our way of rigorously challenging the ecosystem to basically push the envelope, and not in terms of just profit, but also in terms of how you can touch or affect the communities that you represent. And that's why, in terms of DOCA, and RRI, it was demarginalizing the African voice, because we noticed we had funded so many documentaries that tackle such poignant African issues, but the question is, what happens next? So I think, so in developing RRI, we wanted to make sure that what happens next is taken care of, right? And also in our very sort of, internal Pan-African way, we wanted to champion the impact field within the continent. And we reflecting on our positionality as a Pan-African organization, it's very important for the field of impact within the continent being championed by an African organization. So that's where we decided to sit there. And I know positionality is often talked about in the context of a film and you as an impact producer, and we have to have that conversation on an institutional level, which I think speaks to what we hold dear. And as you can see from the films that we've supported, they tackle particular issues within the continent that are very important. And you can see the poster of Mother City because it's already out. We're also excited that we support films that can see the light of day very quickly, mainly because we understand that documentary takes time, right? And we appreciate that as well. That's why also, when it comes to funding and partnerships, aside from just the financial support, you also have to see how aligned you are with the people that you're inviting into your team, right? And then just to give you a little bit of a snapshot, an institutional snapshot as to what an impact campaign's success story looks like. So with Mother in Paris, they applied through our various channels. We have open calls to support films regularly. Sometimes we have them twice a year. Sometimes it's once a year, depending on what the way DOCA is moving and its focus within that particular time. And with Mother in Paris, they were recipients of our impact grant. And one thing I'd say about Enver is that he had some experience with impact. He'd had a film before, I think 2 films before that, he had run impact campaigns. And now when we came in fact, his proposal was stellar from the beginning. Like, he knew where he wanted to go. He knew he wanted to embed this into schools to sort of revive the historical significance of Dulce September. And then one thing that actually stood out that I think we'll discuss later is the fact that the impact campaign and commercial distribution don't have to be separate things. They can be very complementary. In fact, from a previous panel that I had in FIFDH, we were talking about alternative distribution, and we realized that in certain places such as Africa, alternative distribution is mainstream distribution, right? And Enver really encapsulated that, because he would send us updates like, yeah, we're in schools and universities, and through the schools and universities, we've gotten a deal to license the film in the US market and the like. So these are things that, especially if you're a film student or if you're a filmmaker, those are things that you should always have in your arsenal, in terms of they can always work together, as opposed to the global situation where everybody wants to be separate. The reality is we can always work together to actually succeed. And ultimately, it ended up with a case study of showing you how you can succeed with your film. And ultimately, he had successful commercial distribution, and he has another film that's coming up, which will also have an impact campaign. And at the same time, when Miriam talked about committing time, The good thing is that even as much as the film premiered 2, 3 years, 4 years ago, we're noticing that even during our doc day in March, there is a petition to reopen, right, the case in France. And as you can see, that already now turns into advocacy, one of the key pillars of impact that Miriam had outlined. And I believe I have spoken a bit too much. I've eaten into my time, but
no, that's all right. Like you speak so eloquently, so why would we want to stop you? But one thing that you really kind of pointed out there that kind of makes my heart sing is that this idea of, it shouldn't be alternative. This should be the way we operate, and that's really lovely to hear. And it's the first time that I personally have had somebody kind of express that in the way that you do, that really kind of echoes my heart, essentially. And I mean, you mentioned quite two wonderful examples in your presentation there. Murder in Paris, I just remember when I watched it for the first time, how kind of emotionally overwhelmed and kind of shocked I was. And then Mother City, I saw it last year at Sheffield Doc Fest, and again, I walked out of the cinema enraged as to what I've learned about the injustice that still exists in Cape Town, the Mother City. And I remember when it won the special mention award, like I was probably the one that screamed the loudest in that kind of auditorium, because I was so happy for that project, because it is such an excellent piece. But all of the stuff that we've mentioned so far, like all of the examples, are kind of documentary-based examples. And what kind of struck me over the last, like since January last year, really, like here in the UK, we've had a lot of discussions around, the impact of television shows. For example, we had a show come out, Mr. Bates in the Post Office, that was an absolute catalyst for change here in the UK in terms of the rights of people working in the post office. And then all of us obviously heard and saw kind of the impact that Netflix Adolescence has had recently. So I was wondering if we can turn a little bit to also talking about how I mean, it doesn't just have to be documentary. And Liani, your work with Climate Story Lab really kind of brings that to the fore, that you can work with various types of media to kind of bring about change. Do you mind kind of saying a few words around that?
Absolutely. And I think there's a growing excuse me, movement to think about storytelling beyond documentary film driving social change. And there's an association between impact producing and documentary film that I think largely comes from the incredible work the Doc Society has done in this space. And they, as Maria mentioned, or you mentioned earlier, they coined the phrase impact producer, and Miriam also mentioned the impact field guide. So they've really done an incredible amount of work to champion using film and storytelling for social change. And I, could be wrong, but it seemed to me that they started shifting and opening up from working on a variety of issues, but through this one form documentary, to using a variety of forms to address a very particular issue, which is the climate crisis, when they launched the Climate Story Labs in 2019. And in the Climate Story Lab space, any story is welcome. A storyteller can pitch stand-up comedy, a novel, a graphic novel, soap opera, anything that they are working on that they believe is the right format to reach a particular audience in order to drive a particular kind of change around the climate issue. And I think that's an incredibly powerful model. And just thinking of audiences in South Africa, for example, we have this history of television storytelling, fiction storytelling, addressing social issues. Just yesterday, I used Yizo Yizo, a series that was released in 1999 in South Africa, as an example for an editing class to my second-year students. And Yizo Yizo is one of those television shows that I remember from my 20s that was absolutely unfunny, and it addressed HIV/AIDS. And so there's no reason why a telenovela couldn't, for example, be used to address the climate issue or a human rights issue or whatever issue you're working on. And I know that the Bournemouth University cohort is largely interested in fiction filmmaking. So I really feel it's important to say, guys, you're invited to the party. Any form of storytelling that you want to use is welcome. It shouldn't just be documentary film. So I think that is a really exciting development. And again, speaking to the fiction filmmakers and the filmmakers who are more interested in the commercial side of production, I also want to talk about, this integrated distribution strategy. Austin sort of started initiating the conversation around that. And I think sometimes people think, I can't do an impact campaign because it means screening my film for free, and I need to make money from the film, so I can't screen it for free. And then also I want accolades. I want to win awards, and I want my film to be invited to film festivals and be in competition. And once I've screened my film for free, the film festivals aren't interested in me. But there's nothing that prevents you from doing a staggered release. So, this creative alternative distribution model that is sort of standard for Africa. You just need to think creatively about when you are going to release your film in what way. I also really think that we can learn from the French, where they have this established pipeline for film financing and film distribution, where from the beginning you'll find that a feature-length film would be co-funded by sort of the more conventional cinema funding arms, but also through broadcast. So you'll find that a broadcaster will very often be involved from the very beginning. And they sequence the films through a theatrical release and, broadcast. In the old days, you would have DVDs, now you would have streaming. So it's really not unheard of for a film to be released on multiple platforms, but to stagger the release so that it doesn't all happen at the same time. And then, of course, you can also think about different kinds of releases in different areas. And the third thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit is this idea that you can negotiate your distribution contract. I think a lot of people are cottoning onto this. In the past, I saw a lot of horror stories of people losing all of their rights when they sign to a really powerful broadcaster or they sign a very lucrative distribution deal. But at the Nairobi Doc Day that Austin mentioned earlier, I really saw every single one of the filmmakers who pitched there mentioned that they had somehow negotiated their distribution contract so that they could retain the rights for impact screenings. And I think a not so hidden secret is that the European and American distributors and agents don't really understand African distribution. So if you are an African filmmaker, you can say, Europe, America, you can have the rights for those areas, but I want to retain the rights for Africa. And that's one of the things that we did with Strike a Rock that Raina Marie mentioned earlier. We said to our distributors based in Europe, we want to retain the academic rights, the impact screening rights, and broadcast for Africa. So, and the impact rights were international. It's the broadcast for Africa that we And they were perfectly happy with it. I think a lot of times people just don't realize that they can ask. When they get the contract, they think this is it. Either I sign or I lose the distributor. But there are many things that you can negotiate in that contract, including the percentage that they take. And then just circling back a little bit to the idea of an integrated distribution strategy, is I really want to encourage filmmakers, especially first-time filmmakers. And so I'm speaking to the Bournemouth students that are attending this conversation as well, is, you know, we know that you want to enter festivals and awards because of the profile that you'll get and the potential for signing further production deals, and for the, you know, the accolades. You know, everybody wants to be critically acclaimed, right? We also realize that it's potentially the broadcasting and the streaming that's going to bring in money. Increasingly, the films that make really big box office are the really big IP-driven films. So not a lot of people rely in sort of in the independent filmmaking space on theatrical, I guess. So broadcast and streaming are the big money spinners. And impact is probably going to cost you money rather than bring money in. Though I have to say there are funders, you know, Documentary Africa, DOCA, is the premier supporter of impact based on the African continent. But there are internationally, there are funders that support impact. So if you want to do an impact campaign, there are ways of at least ensuring sustainability. You can pay the people involved and you can pay for your impact screenings through grant funding. You don't necessarily have to lose money. But there are also ways of cross benefits, and don't think that you should avoid festival if you want to do impact. You can absolutely do festival and your impact campaign will benefit, because if you get your film into a high profile festival, like, you know, Sheffield, which is quite close to you, or IPA, or Encounters, South African International Documentary Festival, or Durban Film Festival, then all of the media attention and the profile that you build through that selection and maybe winning a prize there could benefit you in terms of raising money for your impact campaign. You know, it can draw attention to your, audiences to your film. So really, there's cross benefit. Also, running an impact campaign, very often you can gain media attention through that, which could then lead to broadcast. A great example is a film called Miners Shut Down, which came out in 2014. It's a South African film about a massacre of mine workers who were striking in protest to try and get a living wage from the mining company Lonmin, which is based in London. And the producers of that film, they have, you know, they are internationally award-winning filmmakers, but they are activists first. And so they released clips of the film onto social media while they were still in production and post-production. And a lot of conventional wisdom will say, no, hold everything tightly, don't release any part of your film until your whole film is ready to go to festival or theatrical. But the incredible thing that they proved is by releasing snippets of your film, important pieces of footage at the times when the movement will amplify the message, and your audience will actually be built that way. By the time that film came out, the audience was hungry for the film. They had a fantastical festival run. They had a fantastic theatrical run. They got so many people watching that film. And believe it or not, at a certain point, somebody pirated and uploaded the film to YouTube. And at that point, they decided, no, it's fine. It can go up onto YouTube. And the film is still being screened at festivals, like retrospectives. It's still being used by the movement, and yet it's up on YouTube. So I think people tend to think very rigidly about festival, broadcast, theatrical, and really you can think more creatively. In Africa, we've seen the power of releasing short versions of films or pieces from films via WhatsApp. There are a lot of users. Maria mentioned before that one of the challenges that we face in South Africa and other spaces in the majority world is bandwidth, and the cost of data, the cost of Wi-Fi, it's not everybody on the continent has internet access. So, but a lot of people have a smartphone and a lot of people use WhatsApp. So if you want to get your message out, then WhatsApp is a great space to do that. And, in a recent discussion, the director of Softie talked about how some people just will not sit down to watch a 90-minute film. And you can reach more audiences by releasing different versions of your film. Murder in Paris is another case study that shows that. They had 2 48-minute episodes that were broadcast on South African television. They had a different cut that they made for French broadcast, and then they had a different cut that went to festivals. So, and they earned money from each of those broadcasts. So making different versions of your film can help you to reach different audiences, and each audience is attached to an impact goal. So you can't expect to reach every single impact goal that you might have by, distributing your film in just one way. So I'll close by saying that I think the thing that runs through all of these things, whether you're making a fiction film or a documentary film, a long film or a short film, whether you have, how your integrated distribution strategy works, and also how you negotiate your contract. The thing that runs through and that should guide all of those decisions is, what are your goals with your film? Once you know what your goals are, you need to figure out who the audience or audiences are that need to see the film to reach those goals. And you need to understand where you can reach those audiences. In some cases, on certain platforms, in other cases, in physical spaces. And I think those 3 things are a great starting point for everyone who wants to do an impact campaign for the first time and who wants to think about creative alternative distribution for a purpose. Is, what do you want to do? What is the change that you want to spark? Who's the audience that you need to reach to do that, and where can you reach them?
Thank you so much, Leonie. It's so interesting that you kind of raised this point that in Africa, people want to consume shorter form content, because we just had a kind of a longer conversation yesterday where kind of filmmakers who attended asked the students kind of how do you consume? And this was something that was came out very strongly and said, we don't pay for TV licenses, we can't afford them. We don't want to sit for like 3 hours. We want the short and snappy kind of content. So I think it's maybe a shift in consumption, like across the board, that kind of you point to, that is kind of embedded very much in African viewing culture already. I'm mindful of the time, so I just want to kind of move on to a couple of more topics that I'd like us to unpack a little bit, because I'm curious as to your thoughts, all three of you. I mean, it is all good and well to know what impact production is, but it's not always that easy to determine whether or not the project that I have packaged and paid my kind of blood, sweat and tears is actually fit for purpose for an impact campaign. Do you have any thoughts on how we can know from the start that this is an impact production, and at what point do we become aware of the fact that, okay, I'm ready to take that step and start implementing a campaign, because I think that's something very scary that keeps a lot of people back. Yeah. Do I have to pick on somebody?
Miriam.
Okay, Miriam, I'm picking on you. Do you have any thoughts on that topic? Yeah.
For me, I think that a lot of filmmakers tend to go into the filmmaking process knowing that their film has some sort of social change element to it in terms of just the story and what they want to kind of put out. In terms of an impact campaign, I'll just like one key aspect I see that allow for successful impact campaigns are if the protagonist or do an impact campaign or see that this is something valuable to kind of continue to push the story and continue to push what is the social issue that's represented in the story. I think also what can be helpful for you to determine if you want to actually do a campaign, because there's impact in the film itself, right? Like if you are able to make the film, put it out, it's a compelling story and people are able to watch it, there's impact in that space. But the idea of now really creating a strategy around connecting it to wider audiences and having a call to action and having some like phases of things, that's another level. And I think one thing that can be helpful is to do a pilot kind of phase of your impact campaign. So not thinking this long term, like it has to be something huge, but kind of just starting off with launching the film space and seeing what the reactions, what the receptions are. Do partnerships organically kind of grow to the surface? Because now with that, you can move on into a kind of a larger way. I would say that with Softie, that kind of was how we were able to work. Like we didn't, the campaign ended up being around 2 years long, but we didn't anticipate that. We started with a pilot phase where we had a brain trust. So we had individuals and stakeholders and community representatives come and watch the film, give feedback. We had a premiere within Nairobi to really get more, but events going around and people gaining tremendous power and people want to see it. So we expanded. So I think there's a lot of different.
You're cutting out of there a little bit.
Criteria, what kind of reflections you can have as a filmmaker in terms of the key. Oh, I'm sorry, I think my internet is a bit shifty. Back now?
Yes, you're back. Yeah.
Am I back? Okay. But yeah, if it's the protagonist or the community representatives feel that this is something that can, be larger in terms of representation, and also doing a pilot to see if there's some organic partnerships and ideas and call to actions that come out of it.
I'd like to add to that a little bit. I'll give more of a personal experience because in the campaign for Our Land, Our Freedom, we set out with the goals and the strategies were fairly defined. And the good thing is that the film capture that follows this main protagonist who's already having an initiative, has her own foundation going on. I think that in itself kind of gave us a good springboard to know what or to determine what she may want the film to do for her and to support her work. Because sometimes in what basically the road to social change would be is, plugging the film in an existing initiative. And that in a way can actually accelerate the work. And to one thing after that is when I became a strong evangelist of the pilot phase as being a significant element in an impact campaign. And also, for example, if you're a film student or a filmmaker who's trying to determine whether this film requires impact or not, in as much as you could reflect on it for a while, the best way to do it is screen it, and have an impact screening where you go ahead and just go out there, show the film out, and instead of just letting the people just leave, like have a conversation with your audience so that they can tell you how this film is touching them or what they feel that this film can do. Because then you can use that to determine whether it needs to go further or whether just the action of just it being viewed and creating awareness is enough. So, and I have this saying, which is basically coming from my work in the impact campaign. Impact, in as much as that it's good and it can take a long time, it's one of those fields that is very urgent. You have to be very intentional and understand the urgency of your actions. You might not have a lot of time to reflect over the things that you want to do, because sometimes maybe the issue that is being discussed in your film is detrimental to people's security and safety. So you have to be very intentional and urgent about it. It's not the and I use a very anecdotal conversation because in another forum we might talk about the relationship between an impact producer and the film team. But one conversation that I've had with the film team was, unlike raising money or producing the film where we could spend time discussing how we want to do things and how we want to move things, with impact, we have to understand what is necessary and what is important for the community that is being represented now.
Yeah.
So when having those conversations around the impact in the impact space, is you have to do right intentionally and carefully. Action comes first, intentionally and carefully, in understanding what happens. So it's not as easy to sit down and say, okay, my film is tackling this, maybe this could be the impact. No, go to the community, have them inform you what they want this film to do. And I think that's when you can have a sort of foundation to determine whether your film has an impact or what the impact for your film looks like.
Yeah. There's a real urgency to that,
Yes.
isn't there? Yeah, yeah. Liane, do you have something to add?
Of course I do. Made notes. I would say that the starting point in this is for the filmmaker to really think, do I want to do an impact? Am I an impact filmmaker? Because even if you have an impact producer, it will require work, energy, time from you. I would also say that not every film is an impact film, and that's absolutely fine. You know, we don't expect every film to be an impact film. What is important is that there is, to weave another golden thread, that there's a strong golden thread that runs through from your film to the issue, to the goals that you set. And, you know, sometimes people will speak to one of us about a film that they want to use for impact. But what they say the impact is that they want to achieve doesn't link at all to the content, the themes, the emotion in the film. So you have to make sure that there's a relevant, meaningful, strong link between what you've captured in the film, the issue that you want to support and amplify, and the goals that you set for that. And then definitely the filmmaker needs to think about their own capacity, because very often an impact campaign, especially at the beginning, especially for a new filmmaker who's not very well known, who doesn't have links to a lot of funding, it will come down to the filmmaker. Sometimes, I mean, this land, Mother City, is a film that that Austin mentioned earlier. That impact campaign has really come down to one of the filmmakers, one of the directors. And if you know that you don't have the money or access to money to hire an impact team, and you don't have the capacity, the film could have incredible impact potential, but if there isn't a person or a team that can run with it, then it would be very difficult to achieve that impact.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Again, because I'm a bit mindful of time, I just want to jump to a connecting issue, because we've talked a lot about the fact that we have to be very mindful about the way in which the target audience receive the material. And what works in Europe doesn't necessarily work in Africa, doesn't work in the MENA region, etc., etc. So I was wondering, do you have some thoughts to share, particularly around this this idea of different types of viewing cultures? Because I can imagine that in Africa, you know, the context is quite unique and organic. That needs particular consideration when we think of impact. And we've touched upon this here and there already, but I'd like to unpack that a little bit more because we are talking about the African context specifically. And I'm picking on Nyambo.
Okay. One thing that I might say is that we have to really, especially for filmmakers, and this is directed to mainly the students as well as you know, just creatives in general, right, within the continent. For a long time, also by virtue of the legacy of colonialism, we have not had the opportunity to, you know, control our culture, how it's packaged, how it's consumed, and also, you know, also just even appreciate it ourselves, because you know, aligning with your own culture always seemed detrimental to your own social advancement. And in a way, with first of all, if you look at it across the board, where there is a thirst for African films, there's a thirst for African music, you can see that it's emerging that we can create, we can produce, we can appreciate, we can grow. But now the other element that we need to also look at, both institutionally and also as personally, as people who create and support creation, is do we also have both the capacity and the know-how to sustainably generate interest and appreciation of the work coming continuously? Because at first, the first hurdle was there's not much African content. Now there's much African content. There's not much African content that's reaching the communities or the Africans themselves, because most of it is being made for export, you know? But now we're sort of tackling that. But then how do we continuously reintroduce our work and our content to the community? And now with the layer of impact, how do we make it mean something for them? How do we make it have an impact in their lives and societies? And for me, I feel like I know you pose it as a question, but I'm gonna express it as a challenge, that we're being faced, especially for the new generation of creators, to come up with ways that speak directly to your neighbor, as opposed to thinking about the wider range of you know, I want Cannes, I want you know, Toronto Film Festival. The question that we're being forced as cultural operators and strategists is, how do I speak to my neighbor? Because my neighbor is my sustainable audience, because they'll be there, they will experience the society and the world, especially closer to your POV. So those are the people that we are looking to. And basically, just to sum it up, I know it might sound quite reductive, the challenge is becoming, how do Africans market to Africans? That's the challenge. And when I say marketing, I am not using it in the purely commercial word, but how do we, you know, generate interest and buy-in locally for our own? Because for a while, it's always been the West marketing the West to us, and they're also now gaining the muscle of marketing our own content to us, but they have a little bit of a shortfall because they cannot directly relate to us. Yes. So that's what I would add to that. And I think Liani could speak a little bit into the culture of how the film going culture is in South Africa, as to how that can sort of ground the conversation.
Yeah, I'll very quickly mention that the South African National Film and Video Foundation did audience research a few years ago, and they found that the majority of South Africans are not interested in going to a Cineplex in a mall and buying a box of popcorn and Coca-Cola from the kiosk and sitting quietly with a bunch of strangers in a big room. They are interested in having a watch party. They want to get together with people that they know. They want to be able to move in and out freely as they like. You know, we want to bring our own food. We want to talk while we watch a film, talk to the person sitting next to you and to the screen. And I really think that we have to talk about the models that Africa can share with the rest of the world, because what could be nicer than hosting a watch party at your flat in London and having people over that you know will enjoy this film, that you want to watch a particular film with, and you know, having potluck, everybody brings a dish or a bottle of wine, and you have a great time watching a film together. And I think that it's important for us to think of these ways of distributing our films in coffee shops, in theaters, you know, small theaters, in creative spaces that we hadn't thought of using before as funding models internationally shift and change. We're experiencing that right now. And I also think that word of mouth will become very important, again, increasingly important as things shift online. So, you know, having impact style screening, even of a commercial film, can have an incredible positive impact. I'm struggling to find another word for the life of your film, regardless of whether that's the idea is that the film should have social change as an effect, or whether it should bring an income for you as a filmmaker so that you can survive.
Yeah, well, that what you're saying really resonates with me again, because of some of the conversations I've been privy to over the last day, where producers here, like British producers, have said, like, we have to get people back in the cinema, otherwise our British independent cinema is going to die. And I think what you've just said there is like ahead of the game. Actually, no, we have to shift our thinking that maybe getting people back into the cinemas is not the way that are going to make things survive and change things around. So kind of that viewing culture, I think, is I think impact production thinking needs to feed into that as well.
It's a yes and situation.
Yeah.
I don't think the one needs to happen at the
expense of the other. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Miriam, anything that you want to add?
No, I think Prince and Liani really hit it in the park, out of the park in terms of that. So
great stuff. So I'm going to put into the chat some resources that we've all accumulated amongst ourselves in discussions prior to this meeting. We wanted to kind of discuss around that a little bit more, but we've like slowly running out of time. But I wanted to keep a few minutes if there's anybody kind of in our audience who would like to kind of ask a specific question or engage with something that we've said today, or ask clarification. I really would like to give you the opportunity to do so. Yeah. I'm just trailing kind of the comments as well here. I've not been able to keep track of them as I would have liked. But please do put up your hand or just speak out if you want to kind of say something. No? Okay. Then perhaps I could give you a chance, as you might have thought things through before this meeting about kind of resources, anything that you want to particularly share around GIPA or DOCA, and I know the education work that you do, Liani. So perhaps I can also, I haven't picked on you yet, Liani, so maybe you can start but to say something around that, yeah.
Really, I don't need any picking because I definitely had airtime. Well, I guess with the limited time, the one thing that I will shout out is that we host a 100% online short course. It's a 5-month part-time short course that you can join from anywhere in the world in impact facilitation. So it's an entry-level course looking at organizing, hosting, screenings, and how you hold the space for really difficult conversations that drive change. And the applications are open right now. It's a course that you can do in your pajamas from your bedroom if you like. And the next course starts on the 1st of July. So, apply now. I'm pressing enter to put the link in the chat. And we do that in partnership with Sunshine Cinema, which is an incredible mobile cinema, solar-powered organization in Africa.
Right. And Miriam, do you want to say a few things about resources?
Yeah, just that GIPA on our website, we have a resource page that can be a good starting point for you if you want to just dive a bit deeper into different the resources around the space. And if you are an impact producer who are interested in joining GIPA, it's a very nurturing space, a very empowering space for impact producers. We have our next intake in September. So if you go on our website and just give us your email in the join link, when we do our next call out, you'll get that email around that. But yeah.
Right. So, and last but not least, Nyambok, anything to add?
Yes. First, I'd like to briefly sort of answer the question from Carolina, right?
I was going to come back to that, yes.
Yeah. I've noticed that adopting more complementary structure has been successful. And I know Miriam has said this before in a previous forum, is that sometimes support and collaboration doesn't have to be financial, right? And being very open in terms of what they can do to support the film or to support the impact campaign, I've noticed has been a bit more easier, because we've had situations where we've held screenings that were basically totally managed by the community. And it's just understanding what their capacity is and meeting them where they are, and also, finding the right people to work. That would be the best way to operating, like identifying the people who you're aligned with your mission, and allowing them to basically meet you where they can. That has been helpful throughout the continent, because the disparities are huge across the board. And in terms of resources, DOCA has our website and our RRI page. You'll find all the materials available. At the same time, we've been working on something called ADEPT, which is the African Documentary Ecosystem Platform, that we are looking to make a resource hub, as well, a resource hub that's a bit more interactive, because we realize sometimes reports are done and it takes another half a decade before the report is done again. But we wanted to create a situation or an opportunity where people can interact with the report as it is, and provide or suggest or make suggestions to the existing documents, so that we turn static documents into live, valuable tools that people can use regularly. Still a work in progress. We've just built the site. It's available. I'll put the link after my little talk, but pretty much that's it. Yes.
Thank you so much. I just want to read out kind of Carolina's question there, just in case Miriam and Liani, you have something to add there. What strategies have you found most successful in ensuring that the impact campaigns around African films are shaped and led by communities the films are about, especially when working with international partners or funders? And this is kind of one of the key questions, I think, that is kind of shaping definitely my engagement with impactors at the moment. So I was wondering, in addition to what Nyambok was saying there, do you have any thoughts on that?
For me, it would just be to add to what Nyambok was saying, is and going back to what we were discussing around the pilot phase and like an impact screening with the community itself and the participants themselves to get that feedback, to get that knowledge that this is the baseline that we're working with, to be able to now find partners who are aligned with that baseline has been the most helpful strategy in my experience.
Thank you very much. Liani?
I'm really tempted to say the answer is embedded in the question. You have to be led by the community. And I think that that's very often difficult for experienced filmmakers, somebody, an academic with, you know, a lot of points of view, and also for Westerners, for Western filmmakers. But really, the community that's affected by the issue knows what needs to change. And they also know who the people are who are responsible for the situation. So you can get all of the information from who you film, or the community within which you film. And of course, the ideal is that you are from that community, or that you create a space where the community can participate in telling their own story. And I do want to share, not from Africa, but from Australia. And I'll put a link in the chat now. In My Blood It Runs is a film that I think on that impact campaign, they did some pioneering, some important work in terms of community participation, and they built ways into the production budget and the impact budget to pay community members who were sacrificing their valuable time and sharing, you know, the most intimate parts of their lived experience in the film and as part of the impact campaign. And I think we in the West, I'm from Africa, I think from a Western perspective, it's often underestimated the sacrifices that people make to be filmed. And we go into their houses and plug our lights in and use their electricity and expect them to take a day out of work and expect them to organize childcare and pay for it. And they are not compensated. It's not their work to be in the film. We take off their time, but we don't pay them. And In My Blood It Runs really does important work around acknowledging that contribution that the people who are in the film and the people around the people in the film make, and how much we as filmmakers rely on them and how much we as impact producers depend on them to lead the work.
Yeah, thank you so much, Liani. We've run over 10 minutes now, so I think, unfortunately, we'll have to start drawing things to a close. And really, like, all that's really left for me to say at this stage is a massive, massive thank you to all three of you for giving us some of your time, 90 minutes of your time that you, to kind of talk us through impact production and what it means within the African context, and really beyond that as well. I said at the beginning of today that I really feel that the work that is happening in Africa is, in my opinion, some of the pioneering work that is happening within this space. Maybe it's because I find my inspiration in these stories. I might be a bit biased being a South African, but I really truly feel that, and it is a real inspiration for me to listen to kind of what is happening and what you are doing. And a lot of food for thought as well for me in listening to kind of your contributions. So I hope to kind of the people who've joined us today that you've learned something, that you've enjoyed the conversation. Please feel free to reach out to me at Bournemouth University if you want me to kind of resend any of these resources. The video will be available soon, and I will share that with the respective organizations as well. And yeah, so thank you very much, everyone, and have a lovely rest of your day.